Hello and welcome to the second part of the Dialog system implementation video. And in the first part we covered those three elements of the system. So NPC detecting the player in the interaction zone. I made like quick drawing about that. So this is the interaction zone, this is the NPC and the player. When the player in the zone, the NPC is listening to key press, and when the key is pressed, we emitting the signal to the dialog manager. So here is the second step that we will work on in this video, and I made another illustration to kind of visually represent what's going on in our code. So the dialog manager will receive the signal and check if the dialog ID corresponds with any quest, and it will check the type value in JSON data. For the JSON data I will show how it looks in a moment. Then dialog manager will emit signal to the quest manager with the quest ID to check if the quest, like which status this quest has. So if there is no quest in the array exist, then the status will be returned as available. So that will mean that we will process the dialog that marked as available. But if the quest exists, then we will check the status, and it could be active or completed, and this value will be returned, and based on the value we will fetch the dialog. So here is how my JSON looks like, and this JSON holds all dialogs, so it will be loaded into dialog manager, and the information from the JSON will be used in the dialogs. I also have this quests JSON, which works pretty much in the same manner, but it will be used to create quests and to manage them. But for the quests, as I mentioned, I guess I will make another video, maybe another series, but it's not hard to implement. So briefly, what's in this JSON? We have the ID of the dialog, we have the NPC name, the portrait that will be shown, we have the quest ID. This is really important. This one we will use to check if this quest exists or not. We have three types of text depending on the quest status. So if it's available, I will use this one. If it's active, I will use this one. And if quest is marked as completed, then I will use third one. Also we have the type, which is quest offer. This way our dialog system will understand that it's a quest, and we need to run all this function like checking the quest status and pulling the right dialog and so on. Because for example, we could have different type of dialog, like maybe just information when we can press OK, and that's it. Maybe some action should be taken. For example, if I want to restore health, and when I talking with anybody, like it was in Diablo, I think, when we can go to NPC, interact with NPC, and it will restore our health. In this way, I will just have the function restore health, and this function will run instead of quest offer, and it will not like run all this checking for quest ID and stuff. And here we have responses that player can like use. So, and those responses are depend on the status of the quest as well. So if the status is available, we can accept the quest, and it will run the function start quest with parameter quest 001, which will mean that quest manager will understand that this quest should be created. If it's declined, then we just run close dialog. If it's active, we also run close dialog. And if it's completed, then we kind of have accept reward, and the action accept reward will run, and this parameter will be used to check like what kind of reward this quest has inside. So that's pretty much how my JSON file works, and now I will explain step by step like how this part of the process will work. So we emitting this signal with dialog ID to the dialog manager. Dialog manager checking if it's a quest, and then if it's a quest, then we take the quest ID and send it to script manager. I mean, not script, quest. Yeah, to the quest manager. Quest manager checks what is the status, and if the status, for example, is active, then it will return the status, and then we will take the dialog corresponding with the status and send it to dialog UI. But this is gonna be the next step. And now I will show how to implement the code for this part. So for this part we will look into dialog manager, and from the NPC we're emitting the signal, right? So if we are in the interaction zone, we emit this signal with dialog ID, as we figured in the previous video. So now the dialog manager should receive this signal, and we have this in our ready function. So we making this variable that will hold NPCs, and for that purpose we use the group NPC, and we loop through NPCs and connect signals from them to this script. Also, it's important to mention that we have those two variables with dialog data. We load like dialog data into this variable, and we have the current dialog, which is like filtered dialog with ID sent from NPC. Here we connecting quest manager and dialog UI. So for now we only need to worry about this quest manager, because we will send this signal there. Okay, so this function will load dialogs, and this is pretty much function that loads the file, and we specify where this file is, and records this file into dialog data. So now this JSON file is in our system, and we are able to do the actions with it. So the next function is on NPC interacted. It pretty much means that this function will run when this NPC is sent the signal to dialog manager. So what's going on here? So we pass in dialog ID into this function, and checking the dialog data, which is like our array, like this JSON output. And this statement will check for dialog ID that we sent from NPC. And if dialog ID is like found in this document, then we will specify that this will be current dialog. So we if we found our dialog ID in our document JSON file, then we will make current dialog as this dialog. So we, for example, if I passed dialog 001, it will be filtered in this script, right? And how this JSON output will be sent into this current dialog. So now we're getting the type of dialog to check if it's a quest offer or not, and then we matching the types of dialogues with dialog types that we got from this dialog. As I mentioned, here's the type. So currently I have only this quest offer, because we're working only on quest offer, and if there will be dialog with some different type, then we'll use this one, this output, and it will just say that this is unknown dialog type, and print dialog type that was in the JSON. So yeah, pretty much how it works. We're checking what is the type of dialog in this quest. I mean, in this dialog ID that was sent, And if it has quest offer in the type, we run this handle quest offer dialog. If not, then something else will run, and this is else will print it if there's something wrong with our file, if the file is not loaded, right? Okay, so let's see our so now the dialog manager should emit signal with quest ID to the quest manager. Right now we need to check the status of this quest, since we already figured that it is a quest, right? So now we need to check the status of the quest and decide what type of dialog we will put into our dialog UI. So let's check this handle quest offer dialog. It should be below quest offer dialog. Yeah. Okay, so here it is. This is the quest offer dialog, and it will run when quest offer type exists, right? And so what do we have here? We have quest ID, which we got from current dialog variable, and the quest ID is here. So we will use this dialog 001 quest ID. And if quest ID is empty, then we will say that in console that there's an error and there's missing dialog ID, and we will return it, right? So this function will close. And if it exists, then we will emit signal request quest status. That's the name of the signal, and the value, the parameter that will be sent is quest ID. So we will get quest ID from current dialog, and we will send it to the quest manager, right? So quest manager will receive this signal, and will check what's going on with this quest. So this step is done. Let's move to those two. Now our quest manager should check the status of the quest and should return the status to dialog manager, so dialog manager could decide what kind of dialog to pull through and show in the UI. Okay, so here is our quest manager, and here we have the signal quest status response, which will send quest ID and status for this quest as a response to our question from dialog manager. So the dialog manager will receive the signal and do the actions based on it. Okay, what else we have in this quest manager? We have a variable with all quests, which will hold all the quests that we have, and from this document as I shown before. Okay, yeah. We will have the array of active quests. So those will be the quests that are created and accepted. We have array with completed quests. This one will have the quests with the status of completed. So from active quests, they will be moved to these completed quests. We have the function to load quests, and this pretty much the same as a function to load JSON file in Dialog Manager, but here we'll load quests JSON file, and it will be stored in the file. So pretty much self-explanatory. And we have this ready function that load quests. So it runs this function, right? And we connect Dialog Manager this request quest status on ready as well. So when the script is ready, it will connect this Dialog Manager. Okay, so Dialog Manager sending the data and requesting the quest status, right? So we have the variable status here that is checking the quest status by the ID, and this is check quest status, and quest ID is sent here as well. So we're running through the quest variable in active quests and check if it exists. So if it is existing quest, then we will put the status active, like the status active will be returned, right? If we're running it in the completed quests and we can find it in the completed tests, those two arrays, right, as I mentioned, then we will return completed as a value that will be sent to Dialog Manager. But if we can't find our quest in both of those, it means that it doesn't exist yet, so that makes it available. And then if we just can find, like looping through those two arrays and can't find our quest, then we just mark it as available, so we just return status available. And this will be like emitted, so this will emit signal with quest ID and the status, right? So for example, we like added the quest Dialog 001 and it's not exist in any of those, then all those checks will say false and only the available will be returned. Then the signal will be emitted as quest status response, and the quest ID and status will be emitted. And after that, the Dialog Manager will run this, I guess, not the dialog response, this is still in progress, this on-quest status response. Yeah. So this on-quest status response pretty much sending the information from our JSON file into Dialog UI. So it is pretty much the next step, and I will explain how it works next. But now let me just quickly show how it currently works, so you will have the better understanding like what to expect. So here is my Dialog 001 NPC, and I'm coming to NPC and click on X. Now, as you can see, I see the portrait that was used. Like, as you can see, I have in Dialogs I have this portrait, and it's stored in textures NPC Farmer John. So I'm using this portrait. I'm using the text, which is marked as available here, and I have two answers, accept and decline, as marked here, accept and decline. So when I click on any of those buttons, it will run the function start quest or close dialog. But at the moment I don't have working system, so if I click on any of them, it will drop error. As you can see, I click accept, nothing happens, because we should have an error in the debugger, I guess, or maybe just nothing will happen. I'm not sure about it. So yeah, nothing happens because I have this quest log and nothing happens in there as well. So yeah, what's going on in this on-quest status response? On-quest status response accepted the quest ID and status, right? And here we created dialog text and response options. So we're checking if current dialog, which is loaded into this variable based on dialog ID, we're checking if it has text and it has status, right? This status that we passed, which is available in this case. Then we record in the dialog text variable, we put text based on status. So we will put text based on status, one of those. So we have status available, so this one will be pulled there. And if like this condition not met, then we will say that like our dialog does not have the status that we are requesting. So if, for example, some different status could be sent from quest manager, and if it's not here, not exist in this like JSON file, then we will say that like that is not appropriate status. Okay, and here is the same thing with responses. So we record responses as well. So this thingy using the available, right? And then we emit a signal to start dialog with the dialog text, response options, and the portrait, the image of this NPC. So we emit signal to the quest, to the dialog UI, and dialog UI is accepting the signal and showing what do we need to show in the dialog box. Okay, so now we emitted text, response, and portrait to dialog UI, and we are able to display this in dialog UI. So like this, if I come to the NPC, if I press X, when I'm in interaction area, I can see this dialog, and I can accept or I can decline. But we can't do anything when we're clicking on those buttons yet, and I will explain how to finish this in the next video. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe if you want to like stay in touch with this process and like with progress of my